Amna sat at her desk, fingers flying across the keyboard, the rhythmic clacking blending into the background hum of the office. The fluorescent lights cast a sterile glow on her workstation, where neatly organized files and a steaming cup of coffee stood as silent witnesses to her determination. A deadline loomed ominously over her, but Amna was no stranger to pressure. With her headphones on and her focus razor-sharp, she crafted the final paragraph of the report that had consumed her attention for days. The office buzzed with life around her. Phones rang intermittently, punctuating the quiet murmurs of conversations between colleagues. The scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air as a group of interns huddled near the break room, exchanging nervous whispers. Despite the cacophony, Amna was in a bubble of her own, her concentration unbroken until the triumphant click of her mouse as she pressed save. "Good morning, Amna. Great job on yesterday's presentation. It really impressed the clients." A familiar voice broke through her focus. Amna blinked and looked up to see Ali, her boss, standing by her desk. He was holding a tablet, a soft smile playing on his lips. Ali wasn't the kind of boss who threw compliments around lightly, so his words carried weight. "Thank you, sir," Amna replied, slightly startled but clearly pleased. "I'm glad it helped." Ali lingered for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. "Your attention to detail really stood out. Keep it up." With a small nod, he turned and walked away, leaving Amna to process the interaction. Her cheeks warmed as she stared at her screen, willing herself to focus again. Over the past few weeks, Ali's compliments had grown more frequent, and while she tried to maintain her professionalism, a small part of her couldn't help but feel flattered. She reminded herself to tread carefully. This was work after all, and she had no intention of letting emotions complicate things. Outside her window, the city roared on, its pace matching her own as she refocused on the next task at hand, her fingers poised above the keyboard once more. The coffee shop buzzed softly with chatter and the clinking of ceramic mugs as Amna pushed open the door and spotted Sarah at their usual corner table. It was a cozy little place, the kind of spot where conversations flowed easily and time seemed to slow down. Amna walked over, setting her bag down before collapsing into the chair opposite her best friend. "Rough morning?" Sarah asked with a knowing grin, sliding Amna's latte across the table. Amna took a sip, savoring the warmth of the drink as she shook her head. "Not exactly rough, just confusing." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "All right, spill. You've been quiet since you sat down, and that's not like you. What's going on?" Amna hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "It's Ali," she finally admitted. Sarah leaned forward, clearly intrigued. "Your boss? What about him?" Amna sighed, lowering her voice. "He's been different lately, more personal. He compliments my work a lot, but it's more than that. It's the way he says things, the way he looks at me sometimes." Sarah's lips curled into a teasing smirk. "Attentive, huh? Like he's interested in you?" Amna gave her a warning look. "It's not like that," she protested, though her tone lacked conviction. "He's my boss, Sarah. That kind of thing doesn't happen, or at least it shouldn't. But sometimes it feels like it is," Sarah guessed, her smirk fading into something softer. Amna nodded reluctantly. "Maybe. I don't know. It's confusing. I don't want to read too much into it, but I also don't want to ignore it completely." Sarah leaned back, crossing her arms. "Well, maybe he does like you. Who knows? But Amna, just be careful. Workplace stuff can get messy, especially when it's with your boss." "I know," Amna said quietly, staring into her latte as though it held the answers she sought. The conversation left her feeling even more conflicted, her thoughts swirling like the steam rising from her cup. The office was eerily quiet that evening, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound breaking the stillness. Amna sat at her desk, her eyes tired but focused as she reviewed the final details of a report due the next morning. The soft glow of her desk lamp illuminated the scattered papers and her laptop screen, casting faint shadows on the walls of the nearly deserted office. Most of the staff had left hours ago, the usual chatter and laughter replaced by silence. As Amna stretched her neck to relieve the stiffness from hours of work, the sound of footsteps echoed through the corridor. She glanced up just as Ali appeared in the doorway, his presence both surprising and oddly reassuring. "You're still here?" he asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and concern. Amna smiled faintly, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "Just wrapping this up. Didn't want to leave it unfinished." Ali nodded and walked over, pulling out the chair opposite her and sitting down. His demeanor was relaxed, his gaze steady but warm. "You work harder than anyone I know, Amna. I really admire that about you." The words hung in the air, carrying a weight that made Amna's heart skip a beat. She swallowed, her cheeks flushing slightly as she replied, "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." For a moment, the two sat in silence. The quiet of the office seemed louder now, the charged atmosphere palpable. Amna could feel her pulse quicken, though she kept her expression composed. Ali leaned back in his chair, his eyes briefly scanning her desk before meeting hers again. "Don't stay too late," he said finally, his tone soft but firm. "See you tomorrow." With that, he rose from his chair and left the room, his footsteps fading down the hall. Amna stared at the empty doorway for a long moment, her thoughts racing. Was she imagining it, or was there something deeper behind his words? She shook her head, trying to refocus on her report, but the lingering tension was impossible to ignore. A week later, the office was abuzz with plans for Ali's surprise birthday party. Amna had been given the task of organizing the event, a responsibility she took seriously. She wanted everything to be perfect, from the decorations to the guest list. Sitting at her desk, she carefully went through Ali's phone, which he had handed over for her to use while coordinating the invitations. Scrolling through his contacts, she added names to the list one by one, noting family members, friends, and a few close colleagues. As she continued scrolling, her finger paused over a contact labeled, "My wife." Her heart skipped a beat. She stared at the words, unsure if she had read them correctly. With a shaky hand, she clicked on the contact, and a photo popped up on the screen. The image showed Ali, his arm wrapped lovingly around a woman, with two young children beaming beside them. They looked like the perfect family, a picture of happiness and stability. Amna's chest tightened as she stared at the photo, her thoughts spiraling. How had she missed this? In all the time she had worked with Ali, he had never once mentioned being married, let alone having children. She thought back to the moments they had shared, the compliments, the lingering looks, the subtle warmth in his tone. She had begun to believe that perhaps there was something between them, something unspoken, but real. Her fingers trembled as she quickly closed the phone and set it down on her desk. She leaned back in her chair, trying to steady her breathing. The realization hit her hard. She had misread everything. The office noise faded into the background as she sat there, stunned, questioning how she had let herself get so caught up in something that was never hers to begin with. The next morning, Amna sat at her desk, her mind racing as she tried to focus on work. But no amount of typing or reviewing documents could silence the storm of emotions within her. Finally, she made up her mind. She couldn't carry on like this without addressing the truth. With her hands trembling but her resolve firm, Amna stood and walked toward Ali's office. She knocked on the door, her heart pounding. "Come in," Ali called. Amna stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "Sir, can I speak with you privately?" Ali looked up, a bit surprised but calm. "Of course," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. Amna sat down but didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Why didn't you ever mention you're married?" she asked, her voice steadier than she expected. Ali's expression shifted instantly, the easygoing demeanor giving way to something more guarded. What do you mean? I saw the contact in your phone, Amna replied, her voice quivering slightly. You have a wife and kids. Why didn't you tell me? Ali sighed deeply, leaning back in his chair. Amna, I didn't think it was relevant to work. My personal life is separate from the office. Not relevant? Amna's voice rose, her emotions breaking through. You've been acting like there's something between us. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Ali looked at her, guilt flickering across his face. If I gave you the wrong impression, I'm sorry. That was never my intention. Amna stood abruptly, her composure unraveling. You let me believe something that wasn't true. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for me? Amna, I respect you as a colleague. I never meant to hurt you, Ali said softly. She shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. Respect? You don't even understand the meaning of the word. Without waiting for a response, she turned on her heel and walked out of his office, her head held high despite the ache in her chest. In the weeks that followed, Amna made a conscious decision to focus solely on her work. The emotions that had once clouded her judgment were now replaced with clarity and determination. She maintained her professionalism, keeping her interactions with Ali brief and to the point. The warmth that had once colored their conversations was gone, replaced by a polite but distant tone. Amna also made small but significant changes to her routine. She avoided staying late at the office, ensuring her tasks were completed during regular hours. She stopped seeking validation from anyone other than herself, learning to rely on her own instincts and capabilities. Most importantly, she refused to let Ali's compliments, or anyone else's for that matter, hold sway over her. Her renewed focus didn't go unnoticed. Amna's efficiency and dedication earned her the respect of her peers and higher management alike. She worked tirelessly, putting her heart into every project, and her efforts paid off when she was called into a meeting with senior leadership. We're impressed with your performance, they told her, offering her a promotion that came with a bigger office and greater responsibilities. Standing in her new office weeks later, Amna gazed out at the sprawling city skyline. The sunset painted the buildings in hues of orange and gold, a view that symbolized not just her career progression, but also her personal growth. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment, one that went beyond professional success. It was the kind of fulfillment that came from knowing she had made the right choices, even when they were difficult. As she reflected on the recent events, Amna realized she deserved better. Better than secrets, better than half-truths, and better than someone who couldn't offer her honesty. She smiled to herself, ready to move forward, stronger than ever. A few months later, Amna attended a networking event organized by her company. The venue was vibrant, filled with professionals exchanging ideas and building connections. She moved through the crowd confidently, introducing herself to new faces and discussing potential collaborations. It was during one such conversation that she met someone new. His name was Ayan, and there was something instantly refreshing about him. He was kind, open, and genuine, qualities that stood out in a room often filled with polished personas and superficial pleasantries. As they talked, Amna found herself smiling effortlessly. Their conversation flowed naturally, ranging from work to personal interests, and she realized how rare it was to meet someone so authentic. Unlike the guarded exchanges she was used to, Ayan's words carried no hidden agenda, only sincerity. By the end of the evening, Amna felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in a long time, not just from their interaction, but from within herself. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt truly free. Free to move on, free to grow, free to embrace a future filled with possibilities. As Ayan excused himself to grab another drink, Amna stood there for a moment, looking around the room. Her past felt distant now, like a shadow that no longer had power over her. With a deep breath, she allowed herself to imagine a new chapter, a life built on honesty, respect, and hope. And this time, she was ready to embrace it.